Good evening. Yes, thank you. Good evening, North America, and good evening, Asia Pacific area. Thank you for all the people attending this webinar. My name is William Wei. I'm a professor of international business at McEwan University. And also I'm the president of Hong Kong, Canada Business Association Edmonton Chapter. On behalf of HKCBA, I would really like to welcome our speakers and audience today. Before we start the formal program, please allow me to introduce a little bit HKCBA, who provided their platform for today's webinar. As you know, HKCBA has been a very great pillar in supporting the commercial relationships between Canada and Hong Kong, as well as also throughout Asia Pacific area. Founded in 1984, HKCBA is one of Canada's largest nonprofit and non-governmental trade association with over 1,000 members across major 8 Canadian cities. HKCBA also strives to provide Canadian firms with crucial market intelligence and important connections through partnership with a bigger family of Hong Kong, through organizations representing Hong Kong government agencies in Canada, and also Hong Kong itself, as well private sector supporters, including, for example, famous Cathay Pacific Airways and the Canadian Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong. So today's webinar is organized obviously by HKCBA here in Canada, and also co-hosted by University of San Francisco China Business Study Initiative. This webinar is designed to highlight the business and cultural exchange opportunities during the Summer Olympic in Tokyo this year, and also the future Winter Olympic next year in Beijing. During this webinar, we have top business, academics, and sports experts in Japan, in Canada, in the USA, and in China. We will discuss and maybe a little bit debate which aspects of the Olympic Games can help bridge Canadian and American cultural exchange and business interests in the Asia Pacific region. We have speakers based in Shanghai, in Toronto, in Montreal, in San Francisco, in Beijing, and in Hong Kong. So I will first introduce my colleague, also Dr. Stephen Roddy, who will moderate with me for tonight. And Professor Roddy is now in Kyoto, Japan, and he is a professor of languages, literatures, and cultures in University of San Francisco. He received his PhD in East Asian Studies from Princeton University and specialized in fiction of the 18th and 19th century, both China and Japan. His current interest focuses on influences of Chinese fiction on late Tokugawa writers and of Meiji period thinkers of the late Qing dynasty. He teaches courses in Japanese and Chinese literature, culture, and languages. He is also a chair professor at the Xueheng Institute for Advanced Studies, Nanjing University in China. And he's currently a visiting scholar at the International Center for Japanese Study in Kyoto, Japan. So I would like to formally invite Professor Stephen Roddy to introduce USF, the China Business Study Initiative, and also introduce Ms. Nora Wu, who will give us an open speech. Thank you. Please, Professor Stephen Roddy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Wei. Well, it's a great pleasure and an honor to have partnered with you in this event that we're co-chairing and co-moderating. So as Professor Wei said, I'm Steve Roddy. I teach at the University of San Francisco, and I'm also a member of the School of Management-based CBSI that is the co-sponsor of this event. So let me say a little bit about that first. So CBSI is headed by Professor Xiaohua Yang, and it's the San Francisco Silicon Valley-based thought leader, knowledge hub, and relationship builder for China business and its global connections, bridging Asia and the rest of the world. It's dedicated to building connections among business leaders, policymakers, and academic communities, and sharing knowledge with current and future leaders about China-related business in Asia, North America, and the rest of the globe. CBSI is very pleased to partner with the Hong Kong Canada Business Association for this event today. And as I've said, I'm honored to share our virtual moderators podium with Professor William Wei of MacEwan University and president of the HKCBA Edmonton section. Although I enjoy sports and follow the business of sports, my main qualification as moderator is, as you've just heard, I'm in Japan now, and I've had a front row seat, at least for my television set, of the 2020, what's called the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. As I'm sure most of you are well aware, the Olympics have aroused mixed emotions in this country since the outbreak of COVID here in January 2020. Many citizens groups opposed them, and as late as June, prominent groups representing the nation's physicians requested a delay or even an outright cancellation. The current surge in COVID-19 cases, leading to a health crisis in Tokyo and other regions of the country, seems to have confirmed experts' worst fears of the health consequences of the Games. On the other side of the spectrum, Japan's strong showing in many sports has generated undeniable pride in their athletes' prowess and strong interest in the amazing athletes coming from abroad. Much of the media have focused on the Games as a welcome distraction from the woes Japan and the world have endured in the past 18 months. As far as business is concerned, the jury will probably be out for some time, but presumably the attention that the Games brought to Japanese companies and products will produce positive outcomes. Campaigns to promote Japanese luxury goods in China are showing evidence that the Games may have a knock-on effect in that area. And the good that will generate that is generated within Asia seems to be reflected in positive media coverage here of the preparations underway in Beijing for the 2022 Winter Games. We'll see how it all plays out. Finally, I should say that the Summer Olympics are not quite over yet here. There are still 4 days to go left in the Paralympics. I've been really touched by the coverage of the athletes and sports before and now during the Paralympics. In fact, I flew into Tokyo in June with the Canadian Paralympic basketball team from Vancouver, who were of course all in wheelchairs along with their trainers. There's some really beautiful stories in the media here of young and old who have overcome disabilities of various kinds. And Japan being Japan, they have even made animated films of some of these stories. I think the Paralympics have had a wonderful impact on the world, and I hope China will emulate Japan's enthusiastic support of them in the future. So it's now my distinct pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Ms. Nora Wu. Ms. Wu is the former vice chairwoman and global human capital leader for PricewaterhouseCoopers International Limited. As the first woman from Asia to hold this global leadership role in the company's 165-year history, Nora was responsible for driving and leading the human capital vision and strategy for the firm's global network of 230,000 people in 157 countries. And she retired from this role in 2016. During her long and distinguished career, both at Pricewaterhouse and elsewhere, Nora has been a strong advocate for women's leadership and issues of diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Nora has served on the PwC Pricewaterhouse Global Diversity Leadership Committee, initiated the annual Pricewaterhouse Women in Business Leadership Roundtable in Shanghai, and was a member of the American Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai's Women's Executive Network. In 2016, she was named by the Financial Times Upstanding Leaders list of the top 100 ethnic minority executives in the US and the UK. Nora remains passionate about mentoring and giving back to her communities. She completed a fellow program at the Stanford Distinguished Career Institute in December 2018. And she currently serves as a trustee member for the University of San Francisco. And also is an independent director for JD Logistics and Mediterrina, as well as, and I'm not sure if I can pronounce this, Invincikids, maybe she can tell us.
Invincikids.
Invincikids, excuse me. I guess it's misspelled here. Silicon Valley nonprofit organization. She continues her role as a senior advisor to Pricewaterhouse Hong Kong and China. She was the torch holder, by the way, for the 2008 Beijing Olympic Games, which we'll see a photo of in a moment. So, Nora, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. I was a little bit embarrassed, and I didn't know that you have such a long introduction of myself. Well, it's a great pleasure to join all of you today to talk about Olympics. I think it's such a timely and a relevant subject, as many of us watched many incredible Olympic Games recently on TV. Even though the recent Olympic Games hosted by Japan was in the middle of a pandemic, it was a very challenging time, and many of the games were played largely in fanless venues. But just like Steve said, history was still made because we see so many athletes excelled and set new record of many sports fields. And especially I found there was so many heartwarming moments came out of the game that touched us deeply. As we watched the TV and we saw that there was two high jumpers decide to share the gold. And there was a 14-year-old Chinese diver came from a very humble background, scored 2 perfect 10. So it's a historical. And there was an unknown 30-year-old novice, a math genius from Austria, won the women, cyclist gold medal. I think she is one of the biggest miracles in Olympic history because no one saw she's coming. A Dutch runner tripped and failed on her last lap of her qualifying heat of 15 meters, and only to get up and won the heat. So the most inspiring and touching moment to me personally was watching the refugee team. There was a girl from Syria who escaped the war and the destruction of her homeland. And she had a big dream with her own determination and persistency. And she was able to participate in Tokyo Olympic Games. And all those moments captured our mind and hearts, around the world. It really transcends sports and exemplify the Olympics value of excellence, respect, and the friendship. And Olympic is a positive for social impact. I had a personal experience with Olympic. Not as an athlete, of course, but as a torchbearer in 2008 in Shanghai. Perhaps, that's the only credit I had to join this panel to talk about Olympic. I was working in Shanghai that time, and I was very lucky to be nominated and finally selected as one of the torch bearer to run the Olympic relay in Shanghai in 2008. Here's pictures of myself. It brought good memories. So the selection of the torchbearer was very similar to Tokyo this year. It's the people from all walk of life, and they play different roles in the society. It all meant to connect them to the games and to engaging people with different backgrounds to the games. 2008 Olympic in China also, I think, helped to raise many social issues. in China, such as climate change, environmental, government accountability, as well as treatment of disabled, because right after the Olympic, there's a Paralympic followed. And also, I think the game brought a large scale of volunteer culture and organization to China, which was not very familiar to many of the Chinese people in China at that time before the game. So by hosting the 2000 Olympic Games, China made its people feel closer to the world, and also the world closer to its Chinese people. So I feel the same effect should also happen for Japan's game this year. In addition, I also believe Olympic Games is largely good for business. During the time towards the 2008 Olympic Games, there was a huge inflow of investment into China, into Beijing, all over the world. It was estimated there was 1.8 million jobs were created. And the games just transformed the city in many ways. It had ripple effect of economic impact, not only in Beijing, but in many cities that host games around China. The growth of advertisement, social medias, mobile phones, clean energy, green technology were phenomenal. It forced some of the sectors to be big players later on. In this year's Olympic game in Tokyo, we have not seen the immediate economic benefits that was usually associated with the games in normal time because of the global pandemic. But I personally believe the long-term benefit, like Steve Ross, Professor Ross said, let's wait and see. But I do believe the long-term benefit of Olympic Games will still be there. The improve the infrastructures, increase investment, and tourism post the games. Most important, I think, by hosting the games, Japan has built a brand, to showcase, its organizations and its hospitality and the host. We all saw how well Japan did as one of the best hosts for Olympic Games, and earned the respect from the world. So Olympic motto is fast, higher, and stronger. In 2020, it adds work together. I really believe sports is a common language that connected people, despite of differences in culture, language, and beliefs. The IOC President Thomas Bach said in his closing speech in Tokyo, and he said, we all stood together in solidarity and in peace. So I really hope that sports will continue to bring us peace and unity, and most of all, enjoyment. So with that, I turn the floor back to Steve and William to start the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nora Wu, for the wonderful opening speech. We will start our speaker session. Our first speaker, Dr. Mark Corlin, he actually emailed me. It's a pity he cannot attend today. He was on a flight from Toronto to Shanghai, and he's right now in transit. I think he has some difficulty to access to the session. So we will start with our second speaker, Mr. Drew Dorveller. And I'm going to introduce a little bit because Mr. Dorveller is also the Vice President of HKCBA Montreal chapter with our HKCBA family. And he possesses over 36 years of experiences in valuing companies. He valued thousands of companies, merger acquisitions, specialized corporate financing on a global basis. He has frequently participated as a financial advisor in corporate transactions and startup businesses, as well as in sourcing financing in North America and also internationally. He has testified as an expert witness in 33 matters before Parliament of Canada, Quebec Superior Court, Ontario Superior Court of Justice, U.S. District Court, Tax Court of Canada, Court of Queen's Bench of Alberta, and also arbitration panels. And he's very well recognized as one of North America's preeminent evaluator of professional sports, franchises, and properties. That's the reason we also invited him today. His valuation and transaction includes NHL, MLB, NBA, CFL, English Premier League, European and semi-professional sports teams, broadcasting and naming rights. He has given numerous interviews featured in international TV, radio, and print media on valuation, financial, and sports business matters. He has spoken at various kind of conferences and authored many articles in professional publication on business valuation, particularly in sports business. And he was elected to the Board of Trustees of the Appraisal Foundation from 2013 to 2015 and from 2016 to 2018 terms, and to the Board of Directors of the CBV Institute for 2006 to 2009. And he was also a fellow with them in 2018. He was named a fellow of Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyor in 2013, and he graduated from Dartmouth College with a BA of Economics and obtained a dual MBA degree, Corporate Finance Accounting, within Pace University. So please, Mr. Zhu Davila, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Wei. And again, a particularly grateful thanks to HKCBA for inviting me to participate on this distinguished panel. I think what's relevant in terms of my background is, as Dr. Wei was highlighting, although I'm a generalist, given my in terms of industries, given my background, my position as a managing director at IJW, which is a boutique investment bank headquartered in Montreal. I have done a lot of work in sports around the world. And also I'm the director of our Asian operations. I co-founded our offices in Hong Kong and Singapore. So pre-pandemic, I was spending a lot of time in Asia, almost equal to back home in North America. And there's a lot I can say, but I think most relevant here is I was we'll say one of the organizers of a group of people, very interesting group, both in Canada as well as Hong Kong and China. And actually, much to my great delight, one of our co-panelists, Keith Fung, was in that group as well. So I'm sure, Keith, when your time comes, you can provide a bit of background. But essentially what we were trying to do, once the Beijing Olympics were announced, and this was back in I remember the summer of 2015, I remember thinking, you know what, this is fantastic. I mean, there's such an opportunity to develop the sport of ice hockey, something I'm passionate about, both professionally. I've played it my entire life. I'm a proud season ticket holder of the Montreal Canadiens season tickets. And I'm just thinking this sport, which, I mean, it sells itself. Again, I'm biased. I find ice hockey to be the king, or one of the kings of the Olympics every time it's held. And I'm thinking this is fantastic because certainly the sport is not widely known or played in China. And I'm just thinking like nothing would be better to develop this sport than to work with developing it at the youth level. So what we were doing was over several years, essentially working with local private schools, working with some governmental institutions in China to organize hockey programs, both building very small arenas, not your big, 20,000 seat arenas, but small ones that were inexpensive to put together, perhaps seating 1,000, 500, 1,000, 2,000 people, again, affiliated with municipalities and with schools, and then organizing, and that's the easy part. The real tricky part is getting what we call the content, actually North Americans, experienced North American coaches, referees, including working with some former NHL, National Hockey League referees, that would come over and organize hockey programs. And importantly, it would also be facilitating, I'll call it a cultural exchange, actually organizing tournaments or exchange programs where Chinese children would come over to North America, say to Canada, and certainly have some competitions against Canadian children roughly their own age, but also learning about culture over here, experiencing perhaps for the first time what life is like in Canada. And one of the neat things, I mean, we literally met with several times with representatives of the National Hockey League at their New York headquarters. They were very interested, very on board. And also even starting to get some Canadian sponsors, some well-known corporate names lined up. They had great interest. I mean, even some of the Canadian media outlets, Business News Network, CBC, they featured, typically myself in interviews that really raised the profile of this whole project. Project is, unfortunately, due to circumstances, largely including the pandemic, it's been put on hold. But we're just viewing it as an opportunity to reorganize these plans and take a longer term perspective. In a way, it's refreshing. We don't have the tight deadline of the 2022 Olympics hanging over our head. But again, it's something that I think there's great potential, and it's also a lot of fun. Just both building the sport and again, as Nora was saying, I mean, there's no better way to facilitate cross-border dialogue than really through all sorts of sports. So that's pretty much my part. Happy to, of course, participate in some of the other sessions, the dialogues.
Thank you, Mr. Dovella. So I'm going to hand over to Stephen Rodi to introduce Professor Michael Goldman, Professor of Sports Management in University of San Francisco. Thank you, Stephen.
Great. Thank you, William, and thank you as well for that very interesting presentation. So let me move us now to our next speaker. Professor Michael Goldman is an award-winning marketing, branding, and sales teacher, researcher, and advisor to organizations in a number of countries. From advising the MTN Group on leveraging their FIFA World Cup sponsorship, to upskilling relationship managers at Barclays and Safaricom in Kenya, to developing sales skills workshops with the LA Clippers. Michael has worked with students, managers, and clients to enhance their abilities to acquire, grow, and retain profitable customers. Michael is an associate professor in the University of San Francisco's Sports Management Master's Program. He also holds an adjunct faculty role with the Gordon Institute of Business Science in Johannesburg, facilitates the Brand Quad series of workshops in Kenya, is a visiting instructor at the Indian Institute of Management Rohtak in India, and is the editor-in-chief of Emerald Publishing's Emerging Markets Case Studies. And in addition, is president of the North American Case Research Association. He's published a range of academic research articles, case studies, and book chapters internationally. His peer-reviewed research has been published in, among others, the California Management Review, Management Decision, European Sport Management Quarterly, and International Journal of Sports Marketing and Sponsorship. And he's also published a number of case studies with the Case Research Journal, Ivy Publishing, and Emerald Publishing. So, Professor Goldman, the floor is yours.
Well, Steve and William, thank you. And thank you everyone for participating in this important conversation. It was wonderful to hear as we kicked off the conversation over the last half an hour, the really inspiring and positive perceptions that we have of the Olympics and Paralympics and similar mega events. And I include a Super Bowl event in North America, a FIFA World Cup, and these other large scale international mega sporting events. It's great to hear. The reality is a bit more mixed. And so I want to share a little bit today, 4 key points or 4 key dimensions that I think we need to keep in mind when we consider the role of these mega events, the role of events like the Olympics and the Paralympics. And I guess my heading for these comments might be, they're helpful but insufficient. So there's 4 ways in which I think these kinds of events can be helpful, that they can be helpful to cultural, international, and business cooperation. The first is around the media exposure that Nora Wu spoke about so eloquently earlier, right? The world's attention, millions and billions of viewers, for example, in the FIFA World Cup, billions of viewers tune in to watch a bunch of people run around on a field and kick a small ball. And so there's this massive attention. And of course, beyond the game or the games or the events in these tournaments, there's the backstory. So there are the CNN and the Al Jazeera and the BBC and other journalists who are hanging out in these countries or these cities for a few weeks, and they go and find the human interest stories. And they go and find the backstories of the neighborhoods in Rio and the communities in Tokyo, etc. And that does influence the world's perception, the spectator, the global spectator of the event, the TV viewer, the streaming viewer. It influences typically positively that person's perception of the city or country. Absolutely. And the research suggests what Nora was saying about the potential positive impacts of that. It's part of soft power, right? So as a social scientist, we know that countries and cities and states will use these kinds of events to facilitate a bit of soft power. We put the military power away, we bring out the sports events, the Formula One events, the Olympic events, and everyone plays nice. Soft power can then be used to increase that government or that city's influence around the world. So that can be helpful. But there are some downsides. And it really depends on what the politicians, what the national leaders do after the event. We saw this most critically when you think about emerging market mega events. Think about South Africa's 2010 FIFA World Cup. Think about Rio, both 2014 with the FIFA World Cup and 2016 with the Olympics. It really matters what national politicians and leaders do the day that the athletes go home. Because the thing about global branding, the thing about national branding, is it doesn't stay fixed. It is constantly influenced. And so you can have the most wonderful perception of Tokyo, of Japan, of China, of Rio, And then a week later, the headlines are full of all the bad news that may be coming out of that country. And the brand perception continues to change. So it is dynamic. And it really does depend on national leaders addressing real social issues that matter to the citizens in that country. If you want those positive, touchy-feely, nice emotions, nice brand perceptions to continue, the actions have to be positive back home as well. So that's the first dimension that I think we have to keep in mind. The second is this question of tourism and business. I'm afraid the research is very mixed on this. When you add the numbers and you add the return on investment of all the public money that is invested in these events, that is redirected from social programs, that is redirected from social welfare investments into a sports event and building stadiums that might never be used again, when you add all those numbers, tournament after tournament after tournament, I'm afraid even when you add in a bunch of tourists that might come for the next 5 years, it doesn't end up with a positive balance. And I would caution everyone to look at these post-event studies very critically. I'm sure Drew can do some good analyses on some of these numbers coming out, because typically what we see is the event studies that are put together by the tournaments are unfortunately fairly biased towards a positive outcome, as you would expect if you were running that event. In reality, the numbers are much more mixed. So we are seeing an increase in tourism after these events, but when you balance that off against a typical tourism cycle, when you balance that off against the investment that was made, it's not always positive. So you have to keep that in mind. The third thing I want to talk about briefly is this question of investment and the focus on infrastructure, because there's a lot of noise and conversation about these beautiful stadiums and the beautiful road infrastructure and telecommunications infrastructure and all the other infrastructure that goes along with a mega event, with an Olympics and a Paralympics. The key ratio that we have to assess is how many dollars, how many yen, how many everything were invested in game-specific infrastructure versus social infrastructure. And typically what we see across FIFA World Cups and across Olympics and Paralympics is that the ratio is far too much focused on game-specific infrastructure. And no matter how responsible and motivated and smart the legacy people are, typically those game-specific infrastructure are underutilized. They're not utilized at all, but they're underutilized. We've seen the pictures, for example, of Rio and Brazil. Many of you will know the stories of South Africa. Look at London after their Olympics. You have to go back almost to Barcelona to see really good models of ongoing usage where the facilities are transferred to teams, to businesses, to organizations that can use that infrastructure on a daily basis. If a stadium is not being used 30 or 40 times at least per year, it is being underutilized. And the data suggests that most of this infrastructure, unfortunately, which is public money, typically is being underutilized. So we have to balance the infrastructure question. And I would say the challenge for Beijing and other Olympics and Paralympics, Winter Olympics, etc., going forward is to make sure that that ratio is much more balanced, game-specific infrastructure versus social infrastructure. Lastly, let me talk a little bit about people, because I think one of the helpful aspects of a mega event is the transfer of people. Right? In the World Cup, the Soccer World Cup, the FIFA World Cup environment, we know FIFA arrives en masse. With the IOC, it's pretty similar as well, right? The international sports bodies and their professional, talented, skilled people arrive en masse to run things. Yes, there's a local organizing committee that puts a lot of infrastructure together and a lot of plans. But at the end of the day, these are international events run by international bodies. The critical question when we think about legacy and the real usefulness of these events is skill transfer. And my challenge to all of this assessment is what proportion of those teams had locals versus internationals? What proportion of the skills transfer and the training happened with locals? And I think a key metric to look at from Tokyo and any other event is in the year or two afterwards. What did the locals who were involved in organizing the event, what did they go on to do? Did they create businesses? Did they strengthen the business of sport in those countries? Did they use their international network to create wealth for themselves and others? What did they do? And unfortunately, the evidence there again is quite mixed. So, not to be a downer, but I think when we consider these 4 dimensions, my argument would be that these events can be helpful, but often they are insufficient. And it requires a lot of very specific work after the event. The event by itself, great, but not enough. Essentially, the work starts the day after the event to make sure that these events can actually deliver many of the benefits that we've spoken about. I look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Michael Goldman, and thanks for mentioning the 4 dimensions from a specific professional research perspective, particularly looking at infrastructure, demand and also challenges. I will hand over to introduce the next distinguished speaker, Dr. Henry Wang Yao, and he is the founder and also president of Center for China and Globalization, a non-governmental think tank based in Beijing, China, and also ranked among the top 100 think tanks in the world and one of the best think tanks in China and Asia. Dr. Wang plays multiple policy advisory roles in China as a counselor for the State Council appointed by Premier Li Keqiang in 2015, and also Honorable Vice Chairman of China Association for International Economic Cooperation under the Ministry of Commerce. Dr. Wang also holds a number of positions in international organizations and educational institutions. He's a steering committee member of the Paris Peace Forum and also a member of Migration Advisory Board of International Organization of Migration of the United Nations. He is also the Dean of Institute of Development Studies in China Southwest University of Finance and Economics, and a member of Duke Kunshan University Advisory Council. And he studied in Canada a long time ago, and also representing Quebec government working in Hong Kong. And I remember Dr. Wang has a very great supporter of Olympic Games, and he has a wonderful proposal to establish Olympic University in China. So I'm going to hand over to Dr. Wang. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, William. Also, good evening and also good morning here for all of you. And I think, first of all, I'd like to congratulate the organizer for this webinar, because I think this is really fascinating. Of so many webinars, I haven't really found anyone that look at the Olympics. So this is really a very unique angle. But also, I think this is very timely too, because 2020 Tokyo Olympic has been long, expected, but then we have ups and downs, we have postponement, and we have all those surprises and no surprises. So in the end, it happened. It was really a great event. I think it will go down in the history of humankind during this big pandemic era, that we still carried a historical Olympic game that really excited the world and revitalized and reboosted a lot of confidence for the world. So I want to really also congratulate on Japan, on Tokyo, for hosting such a great Olympic and with such courage and wisdom and also I think some kind of sacrifice as well, because I think build such a billions of dollars of infrastructure where spectators could not be there, and the ticket revenue wasn't really that great, but nevertheless, they presented such a marvelous Olympic for the world. I'm really glad to see that, and really admire what has been done in Japan, also for the Olympic Committee. But what I want to emphasize more is that we are getting into the world of suspicion, probably some kind of separation, probably some kind of trade war. Of course, we just experienced that, and of course now we are still in the ideological, all kind of geopolitics tug of war going on these days, and that is really we haven't really seen that for the last several decades. I mean, unprecedented, I would say, particularly between the two major or several major power, particularly two major power between China and the US, for example. So I think that it's really getting very, very worried for all of us. I see the US government say, okay, let's compete. When we compete, let's cooperate. We can cooperate, but let's confront when we confront. So there is a confrontational atmosphere going on, and then probably sometimes competition and the confrontation are taking a big chunk of that of the current political situation around the world. What I'd like to say is that Olympic actually presented such a sportsmanship, presented such a great a spirit for the mankind. I think this Olympic has been already 100 years, and I'm very, very pleased, as previous speaker mentioned, that we actually see this Olympic game this year added a very timely phrase to its mental, to its logo as well. We have higher, stronger, faster, but we have together. That's really says something. We need to be together. I mean, after all, we are human beings. We are fighting pandemic. We are fighting the climate change. We are fighting so many common threats to our mankind. Why we fight among ourselves or argue or endlessly yell at each other and things like that? So really, I think this Olympic, give us a lesson, give us a reminder, give us a really good a spirit of let's have a sportsmanship. Let's have a healthy competition. Have a based on the game rules. Let's have a fair competition, and let's be the sportsmen. And then let's recognize each other. Whoever wins the medal, let's raise the flag. Let's sing the national anthem and things like that. So I really think that we need to go back to the Olympic spirit. That's what I want to say today, is that we should go back to the Olympic spirit, rather than we really this atmosphere is deteriorating around the world, and that really worries me a lot. The second thing I would like to say is that I think the Tokyo Olympic is really making a huge headway, because we already have the world locked down. I mean, we haven't established a pattern of a big number of people traveling. Then Tokyo really set a good example of that. They have bared some cost of that. Even though daily pandemic virus patient occurrence is thousands of like several thousand a day, or maybe 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 a day, but still they are not adopting a policy of zero tolerance. They are just going ahead, and then they actually welcome the tens of thousands of athletes and media and all the sports officials, probably in a number of 10,000, 20,000, in a large number of people coming in and out of Tokyo. And then they went ahead on that. I really admire that. I think that's really something that we should be cheered for. But also, the whole world should study how did they do that? How can they maintain the this kind of a large chunk of people coming into the country without too much of a quarantine or lockdown, but then they still carry things around, and then they have produced so much joy, so much happiness, so much positive spirit for the world. When the whole world watched the Olympic Games, I mean that is really, you know, pros and cons, and what has been you know, should we, you know, in order to prevent the COVID. I mean, there's a philosophical difference now. You know, should we have a massive lockdown and nobody should come in, and no, you know, let's lock everybody in quarantine, and then, you know, in order to have no cases at all. So I think that you know, this goes to the Winter Olympics in Beijing. Actually, I'm talking about. That's actually produced a new challenge now. So how can we really learn from Japan, and how can we really, on the one hand, we tolerate a little bit of, or maybe to some degree, manageable occurrence of the new virus patient, but on the other hand, we let everything happen as normal, and this, you know, competition going on as normal, and we produce a pattern for the world where the travel, the tourism can be revived. So I think that, you know, the lessons we learned from Tokyo Olympics, but also coming up on the Beijing Olympics, is can we really open the international travel for the world, while we, you know, we have to learn, you know, probably live with this virus for a long term. So that's I think the meaning of Tokyo Olympics. Just imagine if Tokyo Olympics is cancelled, is not being held, we probably still the whole world is still in the lockdown mood, and we will not start up the revive the economy. And, you know, remember, I mean, tourism counts about 10% of global GDP. I'm sure sports probably another percentage as well. So are we going to really continue like this, always into isolated world, or are we really trying to be innovative, find a new methodology, find a new way of containing the virus? But also at the same time, well, we can revive all the you know, games, Olympics, competition, and cultural events, tourism. It's a big challenge facing all of us. So I would really congratulate Tokyo for doing that. But also I hope that Beijing, I'm sure Beijing will do the same. We'll find a way to welcome international athletes. We'll welcome all the you know, public stuff. So to some extent, you know, if spectators can come, that'd be great. Definitely the media will be welcome, and we can find a way to, you know, I'm sure Beijing Olympic will be the Olympic full of audience, because here we don't have much cases occurring. Everything is almost normal, and movie theater, everything's still going on, and so I'm sure the Beijing Olympic will full of audience to cheer for our games. So that's something missing for the Tokyo Olympic. We don't see the cheering of the athletes. So that's something I really hope that we can achieve. And so what I would like to conclude is to say that Olympic actually serve a great breakthrough for pandemic era of the international travel. You know, just imagine, you know, those many people travel to Tokyo, and hopefully, you know, many people can come to China, and we really should uphold the Olympic games. And you know, William mentioned about Olympic University. Yeah, absolutely, we could, you know, establish Olympic University. We should really have this Olympic spirit and uphold Olympic spirit. It's become so valuable now these days. I mean, a world full of conflict. We just see Afghanistan end up in such chaotic, people falling off the sky and things like that. We really should have a peaceful world. Let's put our competition into the Olympics rather than a fierce competition or things like that. So I think I want to end here. I really congratulate the webinar for you know, discussing this about Olympic spirit, which we are badly needed for this world. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wang, and thanks very much for your speech, and also the message you're talking from Beijing, where your think tank also located. And we are quite confident early next year in 2022, Beijing Olympic will be one of the best Winter Olympic, you know, in the history. And so we want to move to our last speaker. I'm going to ask. Yes.
Really, I just want to add one sentence. So I hope that the world, some country mentioned about boycott Beijing Olympic. I hope they don't, because it's really important that we need to establish the pattern of travel, and let more countries to do that, so we can revive the world travel. So let's not boycott each other. That's not good. So that's what I want to say last. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wang. And I'm going to hand over to Professor Stephen Rodin to introduce our last speaker based in Hong Kong. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Wei. So we've got one more, last but not least. Mr. Keith Fung is founder and CEO of Power Play Sports and Entertainment Limited. Keith's involvement in hockey started in 1999 when he moved to Hong Kong to work for Asia Sports Limited and organized one of the largest tournaments in Asia featuring Gordie Howe. Since then, Keith has been committed to grow the game throughout Asia. In 2016, he took the lead in the project that brought the Montreal Canadiens alumni to Beijing for a visit. He founded Power Play Sports and Entertainment Limited, a company that specializes in organizing tournaments, leagues, camps, and events. Keith completed his MBA at Western University and received his Certified Hockey Professional CHP designation in 2018. So please, Keith, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Good evening, I guess, our friends in Canada, and then good morning here for people here in Asia. So rise and shine for me out here. It's around almost 9 a.m. So I want to echo everyone's thank you-ness to the HKCBA for hosting this. Dr. Wei, Dr. Roddy, thank you for the opportunity. I feel honored to take part in this panel. Myself, I didn't get our opportunity to be in the Olympics, but or organize Olympics. So my shot of fame, just really quickly, is I was actually behind the Team Canada bench in the 2010 gold medal game in the Winter Olympics. So anyone that's kind of searching some of the photos behind Team Canada's bench, I was the guy there that was in the black jacket. So that's just my little shot of fame there. As mentioned in the opening, had a good opportunity to bring the Montreal Canadiens to Beijing, and got them to go to the Great Wall. They came and did camps, and that's kind of where it kind of opened my eyes a bit in terms of how sports and the Olympics can bring kind of people together, right? And also living here in Hong Kong, I'm sure people have kind of heard, back in 2019, where we had a bit, some of the unhappiness amongst our locals with some riots and whatnot. But if you look at the Tokyo Olympics now, that kind of actually rallied the city a bit. Okay, I'm not saying we're out of the woods of everything, but Hong Kong got 6 medals in this Olympics. And I see everybody, we're flocking to the malls. They're watching, rallying behind our athletes. So Olympics together can actually bring us together and see how it grows. Okay, and so that's what I like to. I'm very happy to see. So in terms of the Olympics now, the next one coming in 2022 Winter Olympics, I want my speeches. I want to look at this from a short-term wise and also from a long-term wise. Short-term wise, everything's kind of obviously prepared. The infrastructure is there. The buildings are built. Businesses have been kind of in the country as well to already be part of this great spectacular event. And hockey itself, obviously, like Drew, I have a bias to it because I love hockey. I'm originally from Canada, and hockey itself, if you look at it, is actually, for me personally, I think has a greater impact in a winter sports than maybe any other sports in the Summer Olympics, if you know what I mean. So, for instance, anytime when you think of Winter Olympics, you actually boom, it's hockey. Okay, so. That's why I think there's going to be a great interest in why the NHL wants to come back, to the Olympics. They skipped the last Olympic due to, they couldn't get a deal done. But now I think they're working hard to try to get the professional players back to the Olympics, and that will also put a lot of great interest for a lot of the young players, the clubs, to see that. Yes, there's been talk about, okay, well, China's team probably won't do that very well, nicely. However, if the people, the audience are able to see Sidney Crosby, are they able to see, Connor McDavid, these stars, that's always going to be a huge impact, even just short-term wise. How many kids going to be buying that jersey? How many kids are going to enroll into the hockey? And that's what I mean by the short-term wise. It's going to open a lot of doors to business opportunities, investments, and sponsorships and whatnot. And we are getting a lot of calls from companies from North America to bring in their could be analytics, it could be the products, it could be anything that how do we get involved into this? So once again, the short-term wise, I think it's going to be great benefits in terms of not just people in China, the business there, but also for a lot of businesses in North America, specifically in Canada. I mean, how did it, China always looking also for expertise, right? In terms of hockey, in terms of organizing events, and this is where we come in from, right? So and I think that's going to be a huge impact, having the games here, and like I said, open a lot of doors. Okay, now I know that from a long-term wise, long after, I would say long after, but when the Olympics are finished, how does that affect? I know that Dr. Goldman touched this point as well. I thought it was a very good point. Is like, what is legacy? How is that going to affect, right? And I actually really think that with the coaching and all the programs are coming here to help the programs here, I think it will help a long-term wise in how to develop the sport. I want to touch base on this because I have a lot of friends in Beijing that are coaching and developing hockey as well, and we always talk about the culture. Okay, obviously with the coaching there, there's certain ways how to do it. We're not saying Canadian hockey is always always going to be right 100%. However, but if we can share some of our cultural experiences and some expertise, I think it will go a long ways. And this is what we're also doing here in Hong Kong as well. We're developing a lot of the kids programs, the adult programs. I know last year, just before COVID, we developed a Greater Bay Hockey League, which is for U13s, U11s, U9. It's a cross-border initiative where we have teams from Hong Kong traveling to Shenzhen, traveling, just across the border. Where now we're sharing ideas. We're saying, oh no, this is how the coaching is done here and how coaching is there. So we kind of feed off to each other. So that's kind of where I look at it, from that. So short-term wise, it's great, it's coming up, but long-term wise, I think it'd be great for the hockey and sports overall. I think it's not just hockey. Developing long-term effects will help each other, and one more last point I want to bring up is that it's not just bringing people to China, but we're also want to bring some the kids here to Canada. So let's say next year we have camps that we want to bring to help develop kids and have that cultural exchange, right? And I think that's something where the Olympics itself will bring us that together, right? So that's where my stand is on the Olympics.
Thank you very much, Keith, for that. Well, we have finished our presentations, and now we would like to begin our Q&A with a couple of questions that we have in the doc here for our panelists. So I'll go ahead and William, you please jump in too. But I wanted to ask, and I think we all want to know how, if some of you might have some good examples of how sports, whether the Olympic Games or not, have played an important role in healing divides, especially cultural, but political, social, and other over the years. So I'd like to direct this question first to Nora.
Thank you, Steve. I always personally think, sports brings people joys, hopes, and optimism. I wanted to share a story, Stephen, an old story some of you may heard before called ping pong diplomacy, which happened 50 years ago. In 1971, there was a world championship for table tennis in Nagoya, Japan. And a 19-year-old young American player was accidentally hopped on a bus which was carrying the Chinese national team. So at the beginning, it was awkward silence and a suspicious look from the Chinese players. And then Zhang Zedong, he was the best table tennis player in China at that time, but historically, I think he was a wonderful table tennis. He reached out and he shake the hand with Glenn, and the young man from American was Glenn Cohen. And he started a conversation through an interpreter. And then afterwards, he gave a small gift to Glenn as a show of friendship. In the following day, and Glenn returned the gesture by giving a T-shirt to Zhang Zedong with a peace, a symbol on the T-shirt, and the Beatles a lyric of Let It Be. So the incident was caught by many photographers, and it was widely reported in the media. So we all think this is normal, right? People do interact and talk and shake hands in the tournament, but not then, because in 1971, it was a big deal. It was in the middle of a Cold War, and the United States and China was in a very tense, hostile relationship. And the Chinese player were strictly ordered and never talk to Americans during the tournament. But Zhang Zedong, was very courageous, and he tried to build that bridge with the American young player. Instead of the behavior being criticized by the Chinese government at that time, Mao was the head of the Communist Party in China at that time. He saw an opportunity of diplomacy, of reach out. So he actually shocked the world by inviting the American table tennis team to visit China with all expensive paid trip. So it became a historical trip because that was the very first time a group of young athletes visited China. And most shocking is the following up in 1972, President Nixon visited China. So he made a history of become the very first American president visiting China, mainland China. In his memoir, he also wrote that I never expected the China initiative would come to fruition in the form of table tennis. So I think, nobody anticipate the beginning of the end of a Cold War relationship between China and the United States was from a game of table tennis. So I thought that story was very powerful. And if it can happen in 50 years ago, and I just don't see why it cannot happen again to, using sports to bridge and to connect the people and to soften in the differences and to start a dialogue. Thank you, Steve.
Oh, thank you so much, Nora. That was a very wonderful and inspiring event, wasn't it? I remember it well. In fact, I'll post a book that a friend of mine wrote on that topic. Mayumi Ito has a whole book on the subject, and it's a really interesting study because it shows it did happen first in Nagoya here in Japan. And Japan actually played a very important role in facilitating this dialogue, both before that happened and afterward too. So again, friends sometimes mediate between others who aren't getting along, and it worked out very well for a long time, and we need that again, don't we? Well, thank you. Yeah.
Steve, I want to add one. There was a famous slogan came out of that event was friendship first, competition second. When I grew up in China, also I remember that incident very well. So I saw that it's very powerful.
Yeah, thank you. I remember it. It was very big news when I was young too here in the US. I don't know if anybody wants to jump in. All of you have spoken on this topic, I think, in various ways. Henry, would you like to say anything more?
Okay, great. Thanks. So yeah, the last point I was thinking of making wasn't got too much time, but I saw there's a question about boycott the Beijing Winter Olympic, but I think that is not really a wise move, because because I think right now we already had the world almost close to your 18 months of 19 months of wire with this pandemic invading every country and stop all the travel and exchanges. So I want to emphasize the importance of those big international events can revive the world travel and establish new patterns and maybe find a new way of coexist with the virus, but also at the same time contain the virus. So really, I hope that we had a successful Tokyo Olympic. We hope that we can do a successful Beijing Winter Olympic. So there's really no point to bargain that. I think we should separate politics and athletes and international games out of politics. So I think it's extremely important, vital that we have this Beijing Olympic being held. And Canada is, of course, and the European countries too, US, are really top countries of winter sports. It would be pity for all the athletes and that they've been trained for so long, and every 4 years they have a chance to gain their harvest their big investment. We should not deny them the opportunities. I think it's really crucial to do that, so that we should really encourage this kind of people-to-people exchanges continue. As far as Beijing is concerned, that's why I'm hoping this Winter Olympic can serve as a big experiment, actually a new narrative, so to speak, to really change the mentality. Because now people are really worried. Okay, if we let foreign people come in, then the country will get lost control on the virus and things like that. Kind of a view has been prevailing now, actually. So China becomes a kind of isolated. For example, we've seen a long queue of Chinese students going to the United States. There's about the Charge d'Affaires of U.S. Embassy told me that they're going to have a 200,000 Chinese student visa to the United States by the end of the summer. So you already have a long queue of that. Yet there's no U.S. student can come to China or other foreign student come to China. So that's really ironic. It's because it's so tightening, and once the government have a policy from top, all the layers of the government below add extra tightness to that, so that that mean that the movement of the people is really stopped, particularly internationally. So I really hope this Winter Olympic not only help foreign countries, athletes all come to China, but also help China to re-establish a normal pattern of welcome international travelers, athletes, and things like that. So I think I'm sure Beijing can do fine, and that they are prepared. But then by having this Winter Olympic is really the gear to change the I think next momentum. If the virus is not going to disappear, if the virus is going to stay there forever, are we going to close our borders forever? I mean, are we going to not receive international students? I mean, we have to find a way to cope with that. So that's why I think the Olympic Games this year I'm glad that the two Olympics so close. It's not really just about the Olympic anymore. It's really about how we can reopen the world, reopen the economy, reopen tourism, and reopen travel. And also reopen a lot of family reunion cannot happen because of this. So I really think this is not a small thing. We should really put all the efforts, all the international community, all the countries should support those kind of international big gathering, no matter what. Set aside politics. Thank you.
Wise
Thanks
words.
very
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh,
Thanks
William,
very
go
much.
ahead. Yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Nora, and thank you, Dr. Wang, and also all the speakers. I just want to draw attention our first speaker, Dr. Mark Curran. Although he cannot join us, he sent me a message that he wants people, if you have a chance, the audience can go to YouTube to watch the videos he produced in 2008, talking about the 4 dreams of China about Olympics. The dream one is China want to send athlete to Olympic Games in 1930s, and second dream is China want to form a team and join Olympic Games. And these dream was actually realized in Helsinki in Finland in the 1960s. And also China want to win a gold medal in Olympic Games. This is the third dream. In 1984 in LA game, and China win the first golden medal. And also China want to host Olympic Games. This happens already, decades ago in 2008. And next year, obviously, Beijing is the only city both host summer and winter game. This is such a very special time. And I hope audience can have a chance to watch this interesting episode he made. And also, when I look at the questions, we have a question already talking about potential, people, we already discussed how important opening up the opportunity for travel to attend Olympic Games. And we have an interesting question here from the audience, talking about some specific measures given only 6 months away from 2022 Winter Olympics. What does China need to do to open the country to the athletes, maybe potential tourists for the game? And does China have the will to keep the door open to the world in less than half a year? So maybe our panelists can address this question. Thank you.
Well, let me jump in on this perspective. I think what can China do? From a management point of view, from a business point of view, I think certainly what we see in terms of spectators and tourists and business visitors and the media and the rest of the entourage that we would see travel, it's about clarity and consistency. And I think if we learn anything out of the Tokyo 2020 experience, is many of the difficulties that the National Olympic Committees, that the media organizations, that sponsors who had to pull things at the last minute, the lack of certainty, the uncertainty, the constant changes heading into Tokyo 2020, I think made it really difficult for those that wanted to invest, wanted to be involved, to actually do that. So I think anything that the organizing committee in China and obviously the IOC thinking about the Winter Olympics, the clearer they can be, the more consistent they can be, even if it's bad news early, but get consistent, get clear, and try and stick as much as possible to that. I think that's critical. Certainly the National Olympic Committees drive a lot of the athlete decisions and their families and the sponsors and all the associated broadcasters and agencies. So that entire business piece comes off the back of the National Olympic Committees. And so I know the IOC engages with them regularly, but again, one of the key lessons from 2020, going back to actual 2020, when the Tokyo 2020 Olympics was first postponed, is the communication challenges were substantial. And there were a number of complaints from national Olympic committees that they weren't getting the clarity that they were looking for early enough from the international bodies. And so I think, that's certainly something with the Winter Olympics that needs to be kept in mind.
Thank you, Michael. Anybody else want to jump in on that?
Maybe I could add. I think that the Beijing Olympic Winter Olympic is geared up now, and I know that Beijing municipal government has already set up a very large organizing committee and is already there for some time. And all the efforts is being taken, and all the facility, fabulous facility. I mean, Beijing will be the city, is the only city in the world that hold the 2 Olympic, both summer and winter Olympic. It will be, I mean, they build a snow town just about 100 kilometers away from Beijing. That's incredible in just a short time. So I think that infrastructure is always the best China can provide. And so the only thing is the how to open the country. I think open the country is that I'm sure all the athletes will welcome. I think they're probably talking about a bit like Summer Olympic. That athletes will be picked up at the airport and picked up in a special vehicle and go to the Olympic Village, and then you stay there. Probably you don't have much time to travel outside the village or the sports arena. That is something I hope that by the time Beijing Olympic, maybe we could enlarge the freedom of all the athletes come in, and also for the media. And so for that part, I don't know. But I think for the audience, I'm sure the Beijing Olympic will be full of audience, because the technology China develops, like you have a green barcode, you have everything. For example, China recently found some Delta variant, and then immediately the country put down the technology that China developed, tracing, all those green bars and things like that. Suddenly now two days there's no more happening. There's very, very few now. So I think that with the wearing mask, having the clearance of your mobile phone for the passing code, I'm sure they will be full of audience on the gymnasium or in open space. So I'm not worried about that. And I only hope that by the time next February, which is around Chinese New Year, which is good time for have this for China, I'm sure it will great boost for the China winter sports. And I'm sure it will be more young generation will participate in the ski and all those sports. And so the big hope is to let athletes have more freedom and all those international tourism. I mean, another thing is that shall we open for the international spectators? That is something still we haven't heard much. I think we probably should welcome all those international, the families and the cheer ups of all those athletes to come at the same time. And that would be making a very exciting, interesting, that would be really making a together Olympic. So I'm hope that we keep that's why I really appreciate this webinar, that we talk about this subject. And then let's push things forward, and then let's hope for the best. Thank you.
I would just add to one quick point there that Henry's comments triggered for me, and that's Airbnb. And Airbnb is a sponsor of Tokyo 2020 and Beijing 2022. What's really interesting is if you hit their website, they talk a little bit about their sponsorship, but there's no packages yet. There's no specific website section where I, in North America, for example, can log in and say, right, I want to go to the Winter Olympics and I want to stay Airbnb. And 2 clicks later, I've booked my accommodation and it's all sorted as a package deal. And you'd think Airbnb would want to jump all over that, and you'd expect the Chinese local organizing committee would want Airbnb to do that. So I think those are the very tactical issues that you'd want to see sponsors act on, because they obviously want to leverage their sponsorship as well. And it's a great opportunity, as Henry says, to increase the international tourists, family and friends and others that are going to be heading across to Beijing.
Thank you. Thanks for the speaker. We have another question actually quite related with Canadian-China relations at the moment. I very much thanks Nora Wu mentioned the story about what happened half centuries ago about renormalization of U.S.-China relationship. So audience all know and the speakers all know there is quite a tension between Canada and China. So one of the audience have a question on looking forward to hear some of the opinions from speakers who might be interested in answering this critical question. There is a potential for Canada and China to develop a positive diplomatic relation in the upcoming Winter Olympic in Beijing. However, the most recent update of Meng Wanzhou's case has not been a positive impact on both Canada-China's relations. How would you see Meng Wanzhou's case affect the future of the two countries' relationship and maybe even the Beijing Olympic Games? How do you view on this? Thank you. So I'm not sure any speaker might be interested in answer this question. Thank you.
Yeah, William knows I'm not a political scientist, but from a business point of view, certainly I think that sometimes business follows politics and politics follows business. And I think these mega events, as we said earlier, facilitate a lot of interaction among business people. And many of those behind closed doors, informal conversations between policymakers, between politicians, and between professionals can soften things, as Nora said earlier. And so I would hope that in this specific situation and maybe others as well, that there is an opportunity for those conversations to soften the situations and to understand the different perspectives. But at the same time, I think we all need to recognize that there are bigger issues at play at the same time, and that sport is not the be all and end all, and mega events are not the thing that everyone else should fall in line behind. And so all of these different issues need to be connected. So yeah, I'm hopeful, but again, there are others who would have more insight into some of these political questions.
Thank you, Professor Goldman. Anybody else want to jump in? Thank you.
Okay, maybe I could add on that. I think this Madame Meng's case is really not getting to be very political now, and I think there's a lot of back and forth on that, and so let's tie untie the tie that who tied it first. I really think that given all the hearing going on these days and just concluded in Vancouver, that we can see so many evidence that there's a government order on that based on the U.S. instruction, and then of course President Trump even want to make a deal on that, and also the procedure at the Vancouver airport wasn't really properly followed, and then also HSBC has already said they knew whatever that is the case on Iran. So evidence showed that even the judge wasn't really agreed with the prosecutors on that. So I hope now they've been postponed this to October now, which is after the election. It's become politically sensitive. I really hope that this thing being resolved, because Canada, China is such a great friendly country, and we have 2 million, probably 2 million Canadians, Chinese in Canada. The highest percentage in the G7 countries of overseas Chinese, and the Canadians have we have Norman Bassoon, we have all those great figures in China. Canada has always been regarded as a very friendly country, and we have so many people benefit from this friendly tie, and also the Canadian has the largest diaspora community in Asia and Hong Kong and in Asia. So I mean, it's strong in both ways. I think that's the strength for the future. This is the people to people exchange. So this kind of political event, out of blue, imposed by third country, we should really be wise enough not to be taken. I think if Madame Meng's problem is solved, all the problem will be solved between the two countries on those on those people's issues. So I really hope they do. And also I know that there are some politicians in Canada already proposed that that they hope that they can release Madame Meng as early as possible, so that we can get back to the normal positions, so that Canada actually is a great country and can really play a balancing role between China and the US, and is such a great position. Now it's become such a very bad position on both countries, which is very unfortunate. I saw another question from Professor Yang regarding the green barcode for Westerners who come to China, which they want to protect their privacy. I think that the WHO and the Olympics should probably work together, and EU, China, US should vaccine recognition. We should have international vaccine passport. We should have it's not a blue barcode, but maybe have a vaccine passport or test passport or whatever of some kind, so that we haven't been recognized each other for the vaccine. That's another unfortunate thing. So I hope that the meaning of Olympic is that we can really, promote and push forward for those international travel documents that are recognizable by all the countries with the vaccine and also other test proofs that standardized provided to the Olympics, and so that everybody can travel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Henry. I'm so glad you mentioned Bethune, because he was in my first year Chinese textbook, Bai Qiu En. So anyway, I think we're out of time. William, do you want to add any further comments?
Thank you. Thanks for all the speakers. So I know actually we discuss about, whenever we discuss Canada, China, we will definitely mention Meng's case and also Huawei, which is actually very interesting, because I know Huawei is a very big supporter of NHL before, and quite a big sponsorship for winter sports in Canada. So maybe we have another question on the business side of the sponsorship, because Professor Michael Goldman also mentioned the emerging market companies start, sponsor international events, particularly with the FIFA recently happens. There's actually 25% of the sponsorship coming from Chinese companies. And the question is, who are getting more exposure for sports event sponsorship, and why? Maybe Michael, you can address a little bit on this question from the business side. Thank you.
Sure. Happy to add just some final comments here on that question. I think you're right. We have seen in the FIFA environment, as well as the International Olympic Committee environment, we've seen emerging market multinationals out of Russia, out of China, and out of the Middle East, and also out of South America with Rio 2016, use these events as an opportunity to profile themselves, as an opportunity to appear bigger perhaps than they are sometimes, right? Sports events allow them to become big brands and allow companies to use the same kind of idea of soft power to increase their brand exposure, increase their brand equity, and create connections and opportunities. Let's acknowledge immediately that the IOC and FIFA and these organizations are themselves quite political. And so for these major sponsors that are spending $200 million plus to be part of these events, they're buying a ticket to the table. Those tables are not just business tables, they're also political tables. And so all of that, I think, is involved. So certainly we've seen that over the last few years, as William mentions. I think we'll continue to see that in the same way as 40, 50, 60 years ago, US and European companies did exactly the same thing. And so it's just a new cycle or a similar cycle that we're seeing over again. In terms of influence, absolutely. If you have a seat at the table, you have a voice at the table, and the dollars matter. The dollars speak for you. MTN did that with the FIFA World Cup in South Africa in 2010. They were able to access new markets across Africa and the Middle East as on the back of their sponsorship. So we've seen that before, and I think we'll continue to see that going forward. It raises questions, absolutely, for the Olympics and Paralympics and other mega events. Who has the voice? Who's paying the bucks? Who's signing the check? And from a transparency point of view, from a governance point of view, that's certainly something that we should all be watching closely and making sure that if there are any unethical issues or any governance questions, that we're picking that up earlier, because certainly those are potential issues when you have that kind of business and political interaction that happens through these events.
Thank you, Michael. So maybe if time allows, maybe we can invite our speaker. Each of you can maybe using 1 or 2 sentences to conclude your opinion, so that we will wrap up here with this today's webinar. Is that okay? We can start from Ms. Nora Wu. Thank you.
Thank you. It's really great honor to join this distinguished group of panel to discuss this very interesting subject. So I think we talk a little bit about politics and the people. I think this world needs less politics, and we should engage in more dialogues, and we all should become a better listener, and not impose, your own thinkings into others. Especially, let's get politics out of the way for sports, because it's just a way to connect the people and to provide enjoyment. So it's to soften the divide of cultural differences. So I really think that we should continue to support sports, global sports.
Thank you, Mr. Joel Dovella. Thank you.
Yes, and again, I echo the comments and my gratitude for being invited to participate on this prestigious panel. One thing, again, I don't want to repeat everything that's been said, but one concise, I'll say, soundbite that comes to mind. It's a French phrase, les absents sont toujours tort, which means if you're not, the absents are always wrong. And it perfectly describes how I view, really what our attitudes ideally should be toward the Beijing Olympics. Boycotts don't serve anything, and yes, of course it's unfair to the athletes. That alone, I think, deserves careful consideration. But again, even people, you might disagree, you might be suspicious of the other side, however defined. Get people face to face. A lot of, I'd say many people that are suggesting boycotts should occur, they've probably never been to China. And if you get people seeing how things work, meeting people from other parts of the world, it's amazing the healing process that can occur. I don't think there's anyone in any country that really welcomes the rupture of relations. Let's get them back on track as soon as possible. And I guess, like, my final comment on that is, again, echoing Henry's comments. We need to resume travel as soon as possible. It's not just getting athletes over, it's not just getting sponsorship money, but it's getting a global audience to attend. That would be the perfect scenario.
Thank you. Michael, thank you.
Sure, just a quick final comments from my side. I think for me, these events provide a great excuse. It's a great excuse to do some really important things. We've spoken about some of the important things that can be facilitated through these large-scale events. One that we haven't mentioned is students and studies and education. And so if I think back to the students from around the world that came to South Africa when I was there for the FIFA 2010 FIFA World Cup, and they studied what was happening, and they went to some games, and they interacted with local South Africans. We've seen the same thing with Rio. We've seen the same thing again with Tokyo. Some of our own students from the University of San Francisco and our sport management program headed across to Tokyo to go and study and connect and learn. And I think those are the key points that Drew mentioned as well, and Keith mentioned in terms of getting young sports people together as well to learn from that. So I look forward to seeing that happening with Beijing and other tournaments, and especially as we think forward to Paris and LA 2028, many more opportunities for learning and studying together through these events.
Thank you, Michael. Dr. Wang, please.
Yeah, thank you, William, and also the other distinguished panelists. I think I learned a lot. I think it's really a great, webinar that we talk about this timely subject. I hope that the Olympic spirit will continue, and this newly added motto for the Olympic, together, should really be the theme for the year. We hope that next year when we have the Winter Olympic, we'll continue that spirit. I really hope. Let's get all the international attention on that. Let's get WHO and also Olympic Committee to work on that and facilitate the travel. I think the most important thing is that we need to revive the world economy and world tourism and world travel and student and all the other exchanges. And Olympic can be serving as a great door opener for that. And let's use that because it's politically correct. For having Olympic in China, and then if they want to have Olympic in China, they have to think a way of accommodating world travel. So it's a great reform, reason that China really has to work on. I hope that the whole world will support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wang, and Case Fong from Hong Kong. Thank you.
Yeah, as much as we want to say, we don't want to see politics into sports. Unfortunately, that's never going to happen. It's always going to be a question and discussion and arguments and whatnot. So, however, we all know, and sports lovers, especially myself, from what I can see, also that happened with Tokyo is that obviously Olympics bring people together, right? And I don't know about anyone else, but for me, that 2 weeks there, my focus was just looking at sports, looking at events, and I just totally forgot about any of the political stuff that's around me or anything that's bad. All right, and really cheered on the athletes, whichever country's from, and you just saw so many amazing things, right? Amazing stories that came out of it. I mean, just recently, I'm sure you people probably heard of the story about the. I forgot which country. I apologize. Maybe someone can help me out here. Where she had her gold medal, but she auctioned it out, for a family, but the government or the company that won the bid actually gave back her gold medal. So stories like that are not just heartwarming, but it brings people together, right? And now with the 2022 Winter Olympics, and I hope to bring the people together again. And especially in this, such a bad period of time with the pandemic going on. So more events like this and, bringing people together really, really helps. And, whether it's just, physically, but also mentally as well, too. So good luck to the games. And again, thank you again for this opportunity to be part of this panel. And it's great to connect with all of you here and listen to different opinions and whatnot. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fong. And Professor Rodi, do you want to say something?
Oh, no, I don't have anything to add except thanks to all of you for fantastic presentations and comments about all of these issues. So I hope that you will continue to keep us informed in months and years ahead.
Yes.
So that's all I have to say. I noticed that Xiaohua Yang is here with us. I don't know if she wants to say a couple of words, the director of the CBSI that is a co-sponsor of this event.
Thank you, for sure. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I actually just want to say, thank you to all the distinguished speakers here. Some of your old friends, for a long time, Henry from Beijing, and so Henry and I know for a long time. But also, I'm so pleased to meet the new friends. And everything you said, it's just amazing, truly amazing. I hope that this is not the last one. This is just beginning of such a wonderful dialogue. And what you emphasize, about Olympic as, as a competition, not a conflict, as a soft power, not a war, as to me, Olympic game, like, it's like a bright star in the dark sky right now. So this is really is going to drive the world forward. So I'm just pleased that you're able to speak and share your views with the audience. And I will also want to thank the audience for being here. And it's been such a great pleasure working with William. I want to credit this webinar to William. His idea, he came to me and I said, yes, of course, this is such a wonderful topic, to have a discussion. So thank you, William. And thank you everyone here. And thank you, Steve, for joining us as a moderator today. And wonderful, everyone's just, I totally agree with what you have said. So thank you and good evening.
Thank you, Professor Yang. Actually, I want to share a personal story because I was actually raised up in Zhangjiakou, where the Winter Olympic in Beijing will be hosted. It's about 100 kilometers north of Beijing. When I was like 3 or 4 years old, my mom is a primary school teacher down in Zhangjiakou. So before I going back to Beijing with her, I still remember, at that time in 1970s, the villages and the poverty and the poor in not far from Beijing. But today I heard a lot. I never traveled back. I heard a lot of development over there. Faster train, all the high rises, a new city. And I also just want to share with you, actually, Norman Basson actually working in northern part of Beijing when the anti-Japanese war happening in China in the 1940s. So I actually promised my mom next year during the Winter Olympic, I should bring him to visit where she worked when she was quite young at that time. I hope my wish can be realized. And also I can show some of my Canadian colleagues and friends, how Beijing developed and how, experience the faster train, all these interesting happening in China. Thank you. And I also want to thank HKCBA. I want to thank University of San Francisco, CBSI, and all the speakers tonight. And also I want to thank all the audience to join us for this webinar. And hopefully we can meet in the future again. Thank you. Thanks for everyone. Bye-bye.